James Kaufman, World News Report, today, August 1st, 2024. God bless you and yours, no matter where you are in the world. Please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell for critical future updates. Ladies and gentlemen, today, NOAA is saying that we've had 6 hours of a geomagnetic storm, a KP5 and a KP 4.67, the first 6 hours of today, i.e. a G1 minor geomagnetic storm. Along with that, they said that we were in geomagnetic storm levels yesterday from around 1 to 4 in the afternoon. Now, this is our estimated planetary KP index, just upgraded, the one that's used by NOAA and NASA exclusively. Let's take a look at some of the data from our Discover real-time solar wind satellite and see if any of this makes sense. All right, taking a look at Discover real-time solar wind satellite, we see that the day starts right here. And we do have an onset of plasma. Although our shields are generally down, the highest plasma I can find is the one I showed you last night, the 20.34 for 1 minute, and then the 14. Let's see if we can grab that one right here. The 14.29 for an additional minute. So the winds here are at 469. So I guess that was the impact that created the G1 storm. And here comes the second one. This might be a little bit more laughable. 11.48. We all know that 10 centimeters cubed is a space weather threshold. Regularly, we see plasma in the 20s and 25s with no geomagnetic storm indicated. And the winds here are only 449 kilometers per second. Our shields are completely down, like they're not being hit by anything, because they're not being hit by anything. It is absolutely insane here. Solar winds started the day here, 475, 460. They have gone down quite a bit. Below 400, they've popped back up just recently to the 450 range. None of that should be alarming. We just got another impact, if you will, that topped out at 16 centimeters cubed. Our shields are still down. It doesn't indicate that we had a actual impact up here. And this is a very, very short-term event, too. Just a few moments of a coronal mass or plasma impact. We all know that coronal mass ejections are plasma impacts. We're talking here about 15 minutes worth of an impact that just occurred. The problem with all this is we have really light solar wind temperatures, and our solar winds continue to go down towards the 400 kilometer per second mark. So I guess this is the third impact for the day. Expect another geomagnetic storm, 3-hour bar on our KP index. I guess this is the second bar we saw at 11.48 with solar winds at 449. Come on, talk about reaching. The shields are completely down because they're not having to fight anything off. And this is that initial geomagnetic storm, the 5.0 G1 minor that went up to 20.34 and then down to 14 there. We won't try to grab it again. With solar winds during that time period, about 460. And very cool solar temperatures. So, in my opinion, they're reaching very, very hard to pull out these G1 geomagnetic storms, to say the very least. None of these look like they would qualify for a G1 geomagnetic storm on any other day of the week, unless they would have predicted several impacts. Now, today we were supposed to reach G2 levels. Yesterday, G3 levels. None of that ever occurred or won't occur. The day is almost finished here. Headed over to our GOES X-ray flux. Ladies and gentlemen, we're basically running an M baseline here, an M flare at all times. Now, GOES indicates that we've had 10 M-class solar flares, and I know of an 11th one I'm about to show y'all. Very, very confusing here. We will take a look at that one. I believe it is this right here, but it doesn't show up at 1140 on our Space Weather Live list of M flares. Let's take a look. Again, 10 M flares, Earth facing or on the far limb or coming around the limb today, all registered by our GOES X-ray satellite that's only a few hundred miles up, the sun being 93.3 million miles away, if we can believe anything mainstream science says. Over to Space Weather Live, can see that the biggest flare of the day was an M8.24. Now, I can't comp that with anything here whatsoever. I don't know when that occurred. We will take a look at that last GOES satellite readout so we can see if we can find it. Also, the flare that occurred at 11:45, well, it's not here. And that was a considerable M flare. You won't see it here because it's not here. This does name 10 M flares. That's where I got that number. Running a current baseline of C6.14, a 25% chance of an X-class solar flare, a 75% chance of an M-class solar flare, which is laughable, and a 99% chance of a C-class solar flare, which should be 100%. It does look like several flares are missing, including this M8.25, which doesn't comp out to anything we see here. We do see 10 listed here. We have the M8.25, and that might have been yesterday. We will take a look because it's a 24-hour period. Although we know there was a big M flare at about 11:45 UTC time, which is missing from this chart, period. All right, we've found the M8.75 solar flare right here, and it happened right about 7 a.m. UTC time. And this is the other flare that happened right about 11:45 UTC time. Neither one of these flares, this one being the 8.75, I'll have to grab it just right, and then this one being an M, perhaps 4.13, something close to that, again at 11:45. The problem is neither one of those flares, which would land somewhere in here, the two biggest flares of the day, the M4 plus and the M8 plus, are not listed here. We just saw them, but they're not listed here. We did see them on GOES. We do not see them at Space Weather Live. So instead of 10 M flares, we know now we've had at least 12 M flares, unless those were large filament eruptions. We will take a look at today's activity and try to determine if that's the facts. All right, we've been having lots of action light up, mostly from the departing limb here with 6.5, 6.4. We've also seen activity out of 7.2, 7.4, all part of the very large sunspot that was on the backside of the sun that created the X14 solar flare, broken up into smaller sunspots as it became Earth-facing, as it usually does. But we've had a lot of activity from these sunspots here, especially the ones right on the limb, like 3773 and 3764. With that said, we have 13 sunspots Earth-facing currently. Over to GOES Solar Ultraviolet Imager, 195 angstroms. We can see that last M1.3 explosion here. It's the only one visible here coming out of AR 3774, which is going to be a very active sunspot, also part of the sunspot group that released the X14 on the back side. Over to LASCO C3, we can see all of the explosions coming out of all sides of the sun. Many of these should be geoaffective towards Earth, especially on the far limb over here, along with the sunspots that have already come around the limb enough to be geoaffective towards Earth. So we see that there are definitely coronal mass ejections being created one after another. I almost hope to get hit by now. It's been such a strange trip the last 3 days. Finally, NOAA has gone in and updated their Space Weather Prediction Center. What is it? Thursday? And we have an impact coming for the 3rd now. How interesting. About 30 centimeters cubed, as you can see up here in green, with solar winds going up to about 500 kilometers per second. Must have been one of the M flares today. Earth is here in green. They completely erased everything that was supposed to happen today on the 1st. Look, today on the 1st. And I wouldn't be surprised if something happened tomorrow on the 2nd, because we've had M flares have not stopped popping off. But here they've erased everything. They don't show anything going over 10 centimeters cubed. We did see 2 or 3 instances where it barely went over. One went to 20 centimeters cubed for 1 minute. We go down to our solar winds, and again today being the 1st, they have them starting at about 350 and ending at about 300. We also saw that wasn't the case either. A complete botched deal. We just paid tens of thousands of dollars to redo this Space Weather Prediction Center, which is completely useless, I guess because of the people operating it. The data needs to be given to the taxpayer without any interpretation. This is completely ridiculous. Over to our D-Region Absorption Prediction Center. This is how I first found out about the 1130 M flare that doesn't show up anywhere, although it does show up on GOES. As far as Space Weather Live, right over Africa and Western Europe will continue. We should have another one coming up here at 14. Well, let's see. I don't see another M flare there. These are strong. There's an M flare very light at 1649. And we will continue. So, on our D-Region Absorption Prediction Center, we do not see the second M flare. I will show you that right now. It shows up on GOES either, which is very, very strange. Those two instruments, the D-Region Absorption Prediction Center and GOES, should match up pretty perfectly. And in fact, they do match up, folks. This is the 1145 flare, and I was a little confused. This is the M8.75 flare that's not reported either one of these two, but was not included in our D-Region Absorption Prediction Center. Although they did include this M-class 4+ solar flare that was not included on Space Weather Live. Although the 8.75 was included as the maximum of the 24-hour period, it wasn't listed from a sunspot group. It may have been a filament eruption. All right, over to STO's dashboard. Look for a lot of activity out of this side in 7.4 here. This is today. Obviously, there's an eclipse of the equipment. Lots of activity on that far limb, and I'm looking for activity all around. All these sunspots have been busy. I was looking for a large filament eruption. I'm sure it occurred while our sun was eclipsed, right, by the equipment itself. I see a lot of action over here. And there was a large explosion out of AR 3774 here. It's probably easier to see at 171 angstroms. Let's take a look. The day is starting out right now. We are going to see activity here. And look at the activity coming around with AR 3774. Along with the departing limb. There's the eclipse. We don't know what happened. Large explosion here. And we're having another explosion. I don't even know if this is AR-3774. It might be another sunspot group. Take a last look at today at 171 angstroms. We've got both the incoming flares and the departing flares extremely active today. And there's no telling what happens with that long-term STO eclipse. All right, this is what the backside of our sun looks like. We can see that we have multiple sunspots. Several are about to be named if they have not. This is about a day and a half old. We have 002. Probably the sunspot I just mentioned with all the activity that has not been named yet. 003 here coming around. 005 here. Well, actually, 005 here. 007 here. 008. Well, I don't know if I see 008, ladies and gentlemen, but I definitely see 006 right here. We can see how large these sunspot groups are on Gong down here as well. I went ahead and blew this up so we could find 008, and it's right there. Very hard to see, eclipsed by 005, this huge sunspot group on the backside that's coming around. I'm sure it's a sunspot that we have dealt with before, as many of these are. Over to STO HMI magnetogram. This is 3774 coming around. The other part of that backside sunspot group that emitted, all three of these are part of that sunspot group that emitted that X14 solar flare. It's a reverse polarity sunspot, black over white in the northern hemisphere. This is white over black in the southern hemisphere, also reverse polarity. It's supposed to be 4/1000ths of 1%, according to NOAA, right? This is a bunch of sunspots that all look legit here, and these are our departing sunspots that have been very active today. Again, 13 sunspot groups Earth-facing, and I believe one more will be named today. This picture was taken at 1800 on the 1st, so about 11 a.m. this morning, Central Time. All right, over to SOHO, 284 angstroms. Get a lot better view of what's coming around the limb. It's going to be ugly. This was taken at 6:06 this morning Central Time, and we can see all of the players here. Many of them will be going around the limb, but many of them are coming around the limb as well. So we won't get much of a break, if any at all. They already have an inbound flare for the second or third, I believe. And they predicted heavy storms for today, which I guess we saw them, right? All right, jumping over to NASA's ISWA Goddard Spiral. Anything that happens on this far side here, Earth being here in yellow, is geoaffective because of our geomagnetic connection, this black and white rope to that far side. That will send energy through that connection to impact Earth. Although they've modeled none of the, 12 M flares that we've had today, unless we can say that they modeled one of them that actually went out the limb, coming around the limb. Over to Euphoria, the EESA, European Space Agency. Not one change has been made. It is Thursday. They are gone, girl. This has not been updated. None of this ever happened. None of this ever happened. And they haven't really updated it for anything that occurred today. More waste of tax dollars and time. With that said, we've had 6 hours of a geomagnetic storm, a G1, KP5, KP4.67 today, with very, very light plasma and no solar winds associated. I guess they're reaching because their prediction was so terrible, as usual. Was this just a distraction from the Lebanon and Tehran, Iran attacks? Were the U.S. government, or was the U.S. government involved in those attacks? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know, but this is obviously a distraction from something. God bless. Share, subscribe, and always remember that anything's possible in Bizarro World.